Hello Year 10, welcome to the third lesson of the B7 topic, looking at biotic factors today. So last lesson we looked at the abiotic factors, they were the non-living factors that affect a community. Today we're looking at the 4 biotic factors, the living factors. Our title for today, please write in your book, is How Do Biotic, in brackets, living factors affect a community? And as before, that PowerPoint will be on Show My Homework, so you can print any slides that might be useful rather than drawing lots of things out. And again, remember to pause the video where you need to so that you can work at your pace. Okay, so moving forwards. Here is our summary of the biotic factors, and we're going to talk about each of those in turn, just like we did for the abiotic factors. So if you want to create this as a table or print this table and then write the factors in, that's perfectly okay. Otherwise, we can just use subheadings. So the first one is availability of food, and that could change due to an environmental condition. For example, if there was a drought or climate change, then obviously that can impact the availability of food, but that lack of food means that species may choose to move from that area or die out, so it's obviously going to have an impact, and the food is a living thing, so therefore we put it as a biotic factor. And we've got this thing called succession, where we see we've got a predator and prey situation here where the prey numbers go up, and because then there is more food later on when reproduction's taken place, there are more predators, their numbers go up because they had that increase in food. And then because there's lots of predators, they eat all of the prey, so the prey numbers start to drop, and then because the prey has dropped and they've got less food for the predators, the predator numbers drop. And this is a cyclical process. It works in a cycle. It's called succession. Still part of a stable community, so we can still say that it's stable because it's working in these predictable cycles. Okay, so that is succession. And that obviously, that availability of food has a direct impact on the numbers of the predators. And that availability of food could be quite different if we were looking at plants versus animals, because plants, if there is a drought and they all die out in that area, then obviously there's no food unless there's an alternative food available. But animals could be moving around due to different seasonal variations that then mean that their predators also have to move in order to keep up with the food. Okay, so just write some generalised notes on that, nothing too involved, just a couple of sentences based on what I've talked about. If you need extra time, pause now. Second one is a new predator arriving. So this again goes in with seasonal migration, or it could be that one of those conditions that's meant that a species has to move from one place to another has meant they've arrived in a new area. So we've got the wildebeest migrations here, bird migrations. Obviously when they move to that new area has a massive impact on the ecosystem, on the food webs of the different individuals living in that area. Okay, so they could come into the area, completely wipe out a food source and then move on again, and that's going to have a big impact. Pause now if you need more time for notes. And new pathogens, okay, these are our diseases. Again, living things, and when they move into an area, it can cause massive impact. So you think about that first lesson we did this week, looking at the impact of removing the vole or the owl from the food web. If a disease impacts just one particular species in an ecosystem, that will have an impact further down that food web, down those food chains to the other individuals. Okay, we can see that there were parasitic mites. So this is honeybees producing bee colonies, and here parasitic mites were introduced to the USA, and we can see it's had an impact and the numbers have dropped down of the honeybees. Okay, so that was obviously a pathogen that had an impact on those bees. Okay, Pause to write some notes. Moving on to the final one, we've got one species outcompeting another, so the numbers are no longer sufficient to breed. So we talked again in that first lesson about individuals competing within their own population, so within their own species, but also across populations, across species, for the resources that they need to survive. And if they compete so well that the other species is not able to continue to breed, then they will diminish drastically, and we won't see those numbers return. And I put this picture in here just because it was interesting, because this is called the crown of thorns starfish, and these can cause a real problem in completely destroying coral reefs. And when I was in Indonesia, we were talking to locals about how they try to remove them from the coral reef, and then they try and bury them in the sand. But the defence mechanism that this crown of thorns starfish has is that as soon as they are disturbed, they release thousands of eggs into the water, and so they have loads and loads of babies, and it's their kind of mechanism, which is a really good mechanism for taking over large areas of coral reef, and they really can cause a lot of devastation on coral reef. So that's why they try and bury them and get rid of them and bury the eggs with them. So maybe trying to contain them and contain the eggs when they're released. So that was really just talking about how different species can have some really clever mechanisms in order to overtake everything else that's in the area. So one species outcompeting another so that the numbers of that other species are so small, they basically become extinct. Okay, pause if you need to write more. So these are those predator-prey relationships I talked about, the succession. And a predator consumes an animal that it has killed, so it hunts it down, and prey are consumers that are eaten. So the prey could be a predator itself, could just be a herbivore feeding off the producers. And in that stable community, the numbers of predators and prey can fluctuate, but they rise and fall in cycles. We call it a cyclical process. Might be good to have a little, actually don't have a sketch of that graph because we're going to create one ourselves in a moment. Okay, write down whatever you feel you need to from there. You might have already written it when we talked previously. Okay, pause if you need more time. So we've got this, and again, this is on the PowerPoint on Show My Homework. Alternatively, you can take a quick screenshot from the screen. Sorry, it's got those swirly lines on it again. Hopefully that won't continue to bother us. And we're going to plot on here the ladybirds versus greenfly, and we're going to see that cyclical process of the up and down as the predator eat all of the prey numbers reduce, and then the predators don't have any food, so they reduce in that cycle. Okay, so have a go at doing that. You can do it as a little sketch graph. It doesn't have to be amazing. I know we haven't got graph paper, but try and do the line for ladybirds and just join points. It will be good enough just to join points rather than doing curves of best fit, because there's quite a lot of data and it can get a bit confusing. And then maybe do a green line for the greenfly. So ladybird feed off greenfly, greenfly being the prey and ladybirds being the predator. Okay. So you might need to pause in order to complete that activity, or alternatively take it from the PowerPoint. And then we've got ourselves an exam question, just one exam question today for everyone. The graphs give information from 100 years ago about the size of the population of snowshoe hares and lynx which live in North Canada. Snowshoe hares are herbivores, lynx are carnivores, and prey on snowshoe hares. So we've got this not quite as even a pattern, but obviously using true data, but we can see that cycle going up and down. There will be other factors that will affect the distribution. So, give 3 factors which can affect the size of the snowshoe hare population. Okay, so think about the things we've talked about and what could impact them. Also thinking from our abiotic factors from the previous lesson. Okay, have a pause there to finish that question off, please. The graph for numbers of lynx shows a similar cycle to that of the snowshoe hares. The peaks for lynx usually occur about a year later than the peaks for snowshoe hares. Suggest why for 2 marks. Again, if you can pause now to finish that question, and then we'll do some green penning. Okay, let's green pen then. So we've got any 3 from the hares are breeding, the amount of food or plants available, they could be eaten by the lynx or other predators, the hares could be dying or reference to them being killed by humans, disease, competition for space, or they could have a lack of space, temperature, weather or climate. Okay, so loads of different factors that could affect that population. And for part B, again, green penning please, more food or, more food or hares for lynx encourages more breeding. So if there's less food, there'll be less breeding. And if there's more food or hares allows greater survival rate of cubs because obviously they've got the food, they've got the resources they need to survive. And you could also write less food, less survival. So if they've got more food, their young are more likely to survive, but there is a slight delay because we get that breeding. It takes time for breeding. If there's more food, it encourages breeding. Okay, so that is the end of this lesson. Like I said, nice quick one. You will need to also today go on to Educate, complete the 5 questions, and you will also need, if you want to come into the drop-in teams. So you must complete the Educate today and go to the drop-in teams. For any work that's submitted to me on Show My Homework, I will give out house points. Okay, so hopefully you found that useful, and hopefully this week's lessons looking at topic B7 have been quite straightforward. Thanks very much.